Good afternoon, I'm Paul Peterson. I'm the editor of Education Next, and we are in the current issue of the journal carrying an article by Jay Greene on special education vouchers. Jay Greene is a professor at the University of Arkansas, and he's spent a lot of time looking at these special kind of vouchers. Jay, can you tell me what a special education voucher actually is?
Well, special education vouchers offer any disabled student the opportunity to attend a private school or a different public school with the funds that are spent on them in their current public school. The program dates back to 1999 in Florida, where currently more than 20,000 students are using a voucher. And the voucher amount varies based on the severity of the disability, so that more severely disabled students receive a voucher of a larger amount to cover their more extensive needs. And the voucher amount never exceeds the amount that is spent on the student in their public school.
Well, how does this differ from what we've always had? We've always had private placement of kids who need special services under the federal law in requiring the education of the disabled. How does this differ?
Well, federal law requires that all disabled students have to be provided with a free, appropriate public education. But currently, they can only receive a private placement if parents can convince the school or the courts that the public school is unable to provide an appropriate education. And that's a very high hurdle to meet. And relatively few parents try, and even fewer succeed in getting a private placement. Nationwide, only about 65,000 students are sent to private schools at public expense. What a special education voucher does is it shifts the burden of proof from parents having to prove that the schools are failing to provide an appropriate education. Instead, the parents simply get to decide for themselves if the schools are not doing an appropriate job and if they would rather try their luck with a different school.
Well, isn't this going to cost a lot more if parents can decide whenever they want to send their kids to private school?
Well, it's not going to cost more because each voucher is worth no more than the amount that is spent on that child at public schools already, and cannot cost more than the expense of tuition at the private school. And since the tuition at the private school is often less, taxpayers actually end up saving money rather than spending more.
Well, but won't there be more kids going into special ed as parents want to get their kids identified as special ed so they can send them to private school?
Well, actually, Andy Rotherham and Sarah Mead made this argument in a paper a few years ago, and it's something that Marcus Winters and I just examined in a study that we did for the Manhattan Institute, where we looked at whether the probability that a student would be identified as having a specific learning disability was affected by the availability of private school options with a McKay voucher nearby. And what we found was that as more McKay receiving private schools opened up nearby, the probability that a student would be identified as having a specific learning disability dropped by 15% from before the program existed. And so actually, it seems that having a program like this discourages the placement of students into special education because currently public schools have a financial incentive to move academically struggling students into special education to receive additional subsidies from the state and federal governments. Under the McKay voucher program or other special education voucher programs, schools have to think twice about moving a marginal student into special education because they would have to be afraid that the student would walk out the door with their subsidy and all the rest of their base funding. And so this checks the positive financial incentive to overdiagnose students as being disabled in order to get financial subsidies.
So there's some evidence that districts are actually over-identifying the number of disabled students.
Yeah, actually this is a growing body of research. In fact, Julie Cullen from the University of California has found that about 40% of the increase in special education enrollment in Texas could be explained by these positive financial incentives that schools receive to reclassify students who are simply struggling academically as being disabled in order to get subsidies for educating those kids.
Well, how big a program is this special? Is this something just in Florida, or is this broader, or how important is the special education voucher movement?
Well, it's still relatively small, but it's the fastest growing type of voucher out there. There are more than 20,000 students in Florida. There are also programs in Georgia, Utah, and Ohio. The Ohio program is only for students with autism. And until recently, there was also a program in Arizona, but it was struck down by a state Supreme Court on Blaine Amendment grounds. And so while it's still small, it's gone from 0 to more than 22,000 students nationwide with programs in 4 states. And there appear to be prospects for passage of similar laws in Texas and North and South Carolina, and perhaps Pennsylvania as well.
Well, thank you, Jay. There's a lot of fascinating bits of information. Good luck with your future research, and it's great to talk with somebody from the Razorback part of the world.
Thanks, and go Hogs.